Alina, welcome.
Thank you, councillors. I do not have a presentation, but just by way of background, Drury South Limited is a wholly owned subsidiary of Stevenson's. They are redeveloping a large section of industrial and residential land in the south. They are seeking that a trust be established to manage stormwater reserve. The reasons for wanting a trust established are essentially it's a greenfield site. They want to maintain that parks asset to a very high standard to attract in more business to invest in the area, and that's really the background, and I'm happy to take questions.
Councillor Cashmore, you wish to move this?
Happy to move, Mr. Chairman.
Seconded by Councillor Philippa.
Oh, I got questions first, just in case.
Okay, Councillor Fletcher will second. Councillor Philippa. Yep.
Thank you, Chair. I see on 21, and that's in regards to the maintenance of the property, and you've got in the last sentence that the final quantum will be transferred to the trust. So they'll get all the money to look after the park? Is that what that particular point is saying?
Through the Chair, I'm suggesting that the OPEX, if you like, what it would cost council to normally maintain that stormwater reserve should transfer to the trust. Because it may take a few months to set up that trust, we can report back on the final amount.
Okay, and if the maintenance of the land increases for one reason or another, whose responsibility is it around the OPEX once it is transferred to the trust?
The idea of the trust is if they want to maintain the park to a higher standard than what council's operating expenditure would provide for, they are able to top that up themselves.
Okay, themselves. And just a question on are there any OPEX or costs for the running of the trust from council? Are there any payments to the people who are going to be on the trust? Is there any sort of ongoing OPEX in regards to that?
We can report back on that. At this stage, I have spoken to internal staff from community facilities who have given me that quantum of between $23,000 and $30,000 as a cost estimate of what it would cost council to maintain the reserve. We are not suggesting that any additional money transfer for staff, say for a parks manager or something like that. It is purely to do with what it would cost council to maintain, but we can bring back a further report on the final amount.
It's really just around any monies the council will need to put forward around the 3 members with 2 members appointed by. It's the membership of the trust I'm talking about, the people on there. Are there any costs associated to meeting fees or anything else? Are those costs there, or are we looking at saying, hey, you know, thanks very much for volunteering to go on?
I would bring that back in a further report on the quantum and deal with those matters at that stage.
Okay, and just one more final question. It's on the Māori impact statement, and it's number 24, where you've got here that that the 3 iwi who are identified that have an interest in regards to this particular land is that they haven't been specifically consulted on the trust. So can one tell me why they weren't specifically consulted on the trust, especially in regards to membership of? Because as everybody knows here, there's some co-governance models here where we have a group of iwi that, I mean, the Tupuna Maunga Authority is an example. So I have no doubt that so one, why weren't they specifically consulted on the trust? 2, is there an ability for a member of iwi, mana whenua, to be on the trust?
You raise a good question. In terms of the governance model, I've been advised by our governance section of council that we, if we have half of the membership or more being council appointees, that turns it into a CCO or a council-controlled organisation. So that is why I've suggested that the trust should have more members from Drury South Limited than council-appointed people. We have not specifically consulted with iwi, but Drury South Limited does have a good working relationship with them. They consult with all of those three iwi on all of their resource consenting and resource management issues.
Chair, I just raised that particular issue because that is a concern for me, knowing the three mana whenua that are there, and the ability for them to be around the table is so much better than having, hey, look, we just want to have a little chat to you guys.
Yep.
So I raised that particular issue because it may well come up when the trust is formalised in regards to mana whenua being there, especially with the size of this particular piece of land. Thank you.
I think the following speaker may have some thoughts on that as well. Member Tapu.
Kia ora. I've got two questions. First question, what assurances can be given around the protection of the Hingaia stream through the site and maintaining the level of service for the open space? And I ask this in the context of if mana whenua have any concerns with performance, how would they seek resolution compared to if it was council managed?
Through the chair, we will be developing a service level agreement, a trust deed, and some very clear rights and obligations that are associated with the trust, and that needs to cover a range of issues that you've talked about, also how we deal with complaints or even community groups that may come forward that want to hold activities on the site. So that level of detail will be dealt with in due course. And the streams are incredibly important. The size of the stormwater reserve, you'll see in my report, does refer to the fact that it drains and deals with a wider catchment in paragraph 11. This area is quite critical for how stormwater is actually managed across a much wider area.
So is that an SLA, sorry, Kathy, service level agreement with
the
the
trust.
three hapu?
With the trust. Between the trust and council, the service level agreement is where we secure how we will actually relate on those issues.
I thought your explanation went a bit wider than just council in terms of service level agreement. So you're saying it won't, service level agreement won't be entered into with Ngāti Tamoho, Akitai and Ngaitai?
The service level agreement would be what council expects the rights and obligations to be between the trust and council. We can certainly bundle up some of those concerns or resource management issues that we have into that document.
My second question is coming around the composition of the trust. I think Councillor Philippine is bang on the money. The three members, two appointed by the Drury South Limited and one appointed by the Auckland Council in consultation with the Franklin Local Board. So I see in the report it makes reference to Andy Baker as one of the options. I know it's not a guarantee, but it's part of the consultation. I would like to see representation on the trust be extended. I take your point around the numbers and it being a CCO, but I don't see iwi or mātāwaka representatives being in that category of council. This is a separate representation issue from Māori, from iwi and mātāwaka. So I'd like to see a representation on the trust be extended to iwi mātāwaka of a further 2 members. Given the cultural significance of the area, and to me the best form of kaitiakitanga is actually to be on the governing body, to be on the organisation that makes the decisions, that can monitor the daily activity that goes on. So that's my request, that be considered. Thank you.
You specifically mentioned 2 members.
Yep. And we can help you identify those people, but I think I make the point of that it's quite different to council appointing those people. You know, I think it should be the independent Māori state or iwi hapu themselves, particularly Ngāti Tamoho, the Akitai and Ngaitai, that appoint those 2 members.
Kia ora.
It's the best form of kaitiakitanga you can have. You have people in that decision-making forum.
Next stage of work.
We'll come back to that because arguably if it's the Independent Māori Statutory Board, that's not a council appointee anyway, so we'll clarify those then, Member Kake. We have Councillor Casey.
Yeah, it's just along similar lines as my two colleagues. Co-management means equal numbers, and 3 is not an equal number. And I would support both colleagues in making that appointment from Mana Whenua. I think that would be quite appropriate. I think that would be something we should be doing as the governors. The other one that bothers me a lot is that the Franklin Local Board agreed to this in principle, provided it was appropriately funded. And you're saying today we're about to sign it off without any idea of what Councillor Filipina asked how much it would cost. We need to know that before we know what we're up for. Because once we sign this off, basically we're ticking off the funding of it as well.
No, C has to come back.
But we're still, we're not going to, this is like cart before the horse, I think. I think once we approve the trust, we're not going to go back on funding 4 or 5 members, 3, 4, 5 members, and their meeting allowances and whatever else there is. But I mean, you must have an approximate figure of what a trust would cost of 3 members, 4 members, 5 members. A ballpark figure would be good. Up to would be good. Funding up to would be really good for that recommendation.
I actually don't have a ballpark figure on that. Quite simply, we're trying to put the building blocks in place for Drury South Limited being able to redevelop a very big industrial estate. And I've made the recommendation around bringing back the specific funding with a breakdown.
So are Drury South interested in co-funding as well as co-managing?
Drury South Limited are interested in funding any level of service over and above what the council would normally provide to maintain this area of reserve.
I'm talking about the trust itself.
That may come back in the report.
That may come back.
Yes, she makes a valid point, though. She does. She makes a valid trust.
We will, and I mean, under C, I mean, I'm certainly comfortable that we have got that covered, Councillor Casey.
And the Mana Whenua issue, which, I mean, I think 3 members of a co-governing body is inappropriate, because that means the power lies with Drury South. I'm not saying they're going to abuse that power, I'm just saying the power's not equal. So the way that you could equalise it is simply to have a Māori representative.
I think a co-governance model is not being suggested for the reasons I've explained, that if we want to avoid it being a CCO, the numbers have to be more in favour of Drury South Limited than any council appointees. However, we would take a report to the Franklin Local Board if this is approved with some recommendations around governance, and we can certainly talk about the Māori resource management experience and expertise that could be brought to the table alongside any other skill set.
Councillor Darby.
Thanks. Interesting line of inquiry, which is along the lines I was thinking of as well. So I'm hearing that Drury South at 2 and the council appointee at 1. Before Councillor Filipina mentioned the possible place of Mana Whenua representation here, I was thinking of the representation of an appointee of a community group with an environmental focus. That might be in this area. Mr Chair, I look at this catchment, it's enormous, 57 square kilometres of catchment. So we're not just talking about the 85 hectares of stormwater reserve, we're actually, you've really got to be cognizant of the catchment that feeds into that as well. So it's a tremendous responsibility, and I can't help but think that there's an option that maybe hasn't been explored here. We've just looked at business as usual model and 2+1. And I think this is something else that hasn't been explored here. And we do talk a lot about, shared governance as opposed to the old model of governance of, council, and in this case, the principal funding partner, which is the Drury South group. So, Mr Chair, I'm also of the opinion that we need to explore possibly Mana Whenua representation and also real community representation that maybe reflects a group that has got a very keen environmental focus. Not sure where we take it.
I put down councillor Cashmore as the mover, which I assume.
I just think
Do you
it's
have
too
anything?
early to go any of these tracks yet, Mr Chairman. This is just the start of it. Further work to be done.
So, Chair, just, I mean, just in light of the comment from councillor Cashmore, I mean, if we're at the beginning, why then are we putting up B? Because that basically shuts out any other people coming on there. So whether we leave the composition
Yeah, that's fair.
until we end up coming back with C, I just think that there needs to be some corridor around that, Chair. I mean, at least we can appoint a trust be set up. And I take the point that Member Kake said around, whether it be mana whenua, mata waka, and even what Chris, Councillor Darby, has suggested around environmental groups, or a group, is the fact that they're not council, they're not part of council. So maybe that's one way of getting around if we have 6 members, we are now a CCO. Because that wouldn't be council appointee, and that's with Mata Waka and Mana Whenua. So I think B needs to be reworded, Chair, in regards to the composition, but a trust be set up, because I think it's a very good way of doing that, is to set the trust up. And then when C comes back to us around the issues that have been raised, we then have a debate around, well, not a debate, because our officer has said that it has to go back to the Franklin Local Board as well for their input. So, Chair, I just think that B shouldn't be specific in regards to 3 members, 2 members.
Yeah, we do have to name some members in order to set up a trustee. So we could just add to it, and subject to further advice from Auckland Council's governance team with respect to the most appropriate structure.
Sorry, Chair, yeah, and look, I mean, Jury South Limited can still be in there as named, but it's just the membership around Auckland Council as well. But my late mother always used to say, go with the flow.
Well, I'm looking for
Well, here's an idea that might cater. I don't think we should make a decision on the fly like this. We need to have a council representative. We need to have 2 members from Drury South. But if you were to put should comprise at least, including, that leaves us open to then consider further the points of mana whenua and the local group. I don't know all of the ramifications of it, but that might be a compromise that allows us to get this thing going now, but continue that discussion about the potential adding of 2 other members.
So agree that the trust should comprise 3 members. How did you word that?
At least 3
At least.
members, including
Yep.
2 members appointed by Drury South and 1 appointed by.
And then we add on, and subject to further advice from
Yeah,
council.
you could add that on
Governance
as well.
team with
Yeah,
respect to the most appropriate structure. Got that, Mike?
could do it.
Very good.
So we have councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I was just going to ask a question. Have we ever done this before? Established a trust to manage a proposed stormwater reserve or similar, and therefore what was the trust structure? That's what I was going to ask.
Through the chair, we have the Highbrook model, which is referred to in the report. So that was originally established by Manukau City Council. That model is working quite well. I understand that it has 3 members, and 2 were appointed by the company at the time, and 1 was appointed as a sort of a representative who had expertise in parks management.
So it only had 3 members.
Sure, it's only got 3 members.
Okay. Councillor Hills.
Yes, I understand what everyone's saying, but I mean, in here it says we could just do it the normal council way, apportion budget to do things like we would with any other park, and then the operational money just comes through like any other park through a policy. But the whole point of this is to get an improved outcome, other funding in. You know, we've done it a lot of time, and before my time on the shore, you know, with trusts, separate, who can raise a whole lot more money than council can, because suddenly trusts, businesses, other people want to invest. If it's just a council park, no, or not often will other people invest their money in that. So, you know, I understand it's good for council to have a bigger say, but the whole point of this is so that we can actually get better outcomes, get, you know, more creative things happening and more budget in there that's not based on rates, which I think is a good idea. So I'm just worried that fiddling too much around with it, we might miss that opportunity. Because we could just decide now that it's just another council park that we apportion budget to, and it just happens. But yeah, the whole idea is that it is a majority. If it becomes a CCO, then we're in the same position as well. We can't really get other funding. So what do you need from us now to ensure that we can get the better outcomes?
Through the Chair, endorsement of the trust concept and, broadly speaking, those recommendations so that we can kick off and get that underway.
Yeah, I guess my issue is that if you go through that whole process and then suddenly we come back and say we want a different focus, then it kind of, you know, like I'm confused that we're kind of making a decision now. It'll come back and we could throw it back to having majority council, and then the whole point of the trust is actually there's no point in the trust, and we just revert back to a normal council park.
We will ensure it doesn't have a majority of the council,
Right.
because it will become a CCO, and we don't want that, so.
So effectively the decision's been made now.
No, because if we believe we can, if we can appoint other people, if other people can join the trust without it becoming a CCO, then we're going to get the advice to agree to that.
Works well.
Yep.
So it'd be a model business park.
Councillor Stewart, Member Honeck, Councillor Fletcher.
Yes, I was going to actually ask a similar question to Councillor Simpson about the makeup of the trust. And knowing Highbrook, it has been run really, really well. And if anybody has been out to Highbrook, they will see that it has. And taking up on Councillor Hill's, I totally agree with him that sometimes trusts can actually get funding that councils or CCOs can't. So thank you. Thank you for all your hard work.
Yeah, I was just a little bit concerned. I was a bit apprehensive when you said that you were going to speak to the Franklin local board about the mana whenua mātā waka relationship concerning RMA. It sounded like to me that you weren't going to put it to the board that actually it would be quite nice to have mana whenua mātā waka representation as in governance, as opposed to the usual RMA process.
No, not at all. There would be a further report to the Franklin local board that I would put together with the governance team, and we'd put all the options on the table about trust membership in terms of what is the best mix, that there are people out in the community with expertise in a range of areas, and what is the right representation for the trust from that area.
Keeping in mind that it's been brought up around the table that we're all open to other representation too, not only with mana whenua or mātā waka.
Correct.
But are you conducive of having, would you like to seek mana whenua mātā waka on that trust?
I would certainly be writing the report in such a way as to put forward all of the items we've discussed today, that mana whenua representation, people with community expertise, those people from environmental groups should all be considered.
Kia ora.
Councillor Fletcher.
Mr. Chairman, mine is more a question, and it's a question that relates to whether I'm concerned that we try and delay things too much. I mean, it's important that the trustee is set up appropriately, but we're not being specific enough with the recommendations. So with your you've got to agree that a trust be established. Perhaps you go further, that a trust is the most appropriate vehicle for whatever, so that it's quite clear that there's no intention to set up a CCO? And would it be possible under B, and the Mayor's proposal is a good one, but I don't want to see this being delayed. I mean, what I understand the objectives of this are is that we're going to give the people of South Auckland a higher level of maintenance because of the partnership that we're looking at than they would otherwise have had. So in order to achieve that, I'm wondering whether we could make a bit more progress today with the wording that we've got here. And while you're referencing it back to the council's governance team, perhaps we could invite someone like Member Kake to sign it off so that we've got the appropriate people, that it doesn't need to come back here in terms of too many stages. Obviously, it's got to come back for funding, but in order then that progress can be made, I think B could be subject to the, you could put the most appropriate people in there. But I just see it as just such an, having experienced working on a number of trusts, the opportunity for fundraising and so forth is amazing. To have a commercial partner on board is even more amazing. This is not about sharing the cake, this is about growing the cake. And I'd really like to see us be able to make progress on it in such a way that we're setting a prototype for other initiatives of this kind without them constantly coming back and us all trying to wordsmith it to death. So could you give some consideration to B, enabling to be progressed further?
I hear what you're saying, Councillor Fletcher. I think it's okay at the moment because we've added the extra wording in there to give the flexibility and the consideration for an expansion, because it's quite clear in the report that we don't want to set up a CCO, so I don't think we need to be any more specific about it. I'm going to defer to the mover, and I know you're the seconder, but mover, are you happy with this?
I think it's fine.
So,
Well, you're giving me the assurance. Can I have the assurance from officers that what we're proposing here is not going to delay the establishment of the trust?
It won't delay the establishment of a trust.
That's fine. I'm happy to support
thank you,
it.
Councillor Fletcher. Councillor Walker, to final comment.
Sure. I'll just make this as a comment rather than a question. And I guess the issue that I would put up is the significant likelihood of future conflict, where quite obviously the major purpose is going to be around stormwater. The likelihood of exacerbated flooding in years to come, we're seeing that everywhere. The circumstance where, sure, it's open space, and yes, there'll be drivers for the use of that open space, but the use of that open space is going to come into increasingly conflict with stormwater. So you'll have a bundle of people on this trust managing an area that's going to be increasingly difficult to manage in the future. The notion that it says up there they're going to be managing, manage the 85 hectare stormwater reserve, when in reality their management is going to be much more limited than that, and probably the need to define these things in advance. I see this as a real can of worms, and without a lot of forethought, I think we'll be buying into some problems here, Mr. Chair. So I just want to put that on the table.
Yep.
And I would hope that whatever we do, there will be some clauses around revisiting fit for purpose, because you need to write some sunset clauses, some evaluation clauses into these sorts of things, rather than trying to make them work if they really don't work.
It isn't here. 15 years.
I have full confidence that Alina and the team will make sure that occurs. So we have a mover and we have a seconder and we have the resolutions A, B and C. I'll put them. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against?
Just want my vote recorded against.
Yep.
Thank you.
Right, we're going to move to item 13, and we'll ask Ella and Eddie to come up, please.